Well, hello, my East Providence friends, and welcome back to Mrs. McCarthy's Book Club. I want to do something a little bit different today. I'm going to share a book that has some chapters. Now, the chapters are small, but I'm going to read the book in two parts. Also, I want to show you some other text features about the book. Let me tell you a little bit about it. This is a series called The Magic Treehouse Books by one of my favorite authors called Mary Pope Osborne. And I'm starting with book number 1, which is called Dinosaurs Before Dark. And you can see that this is by Mary Pope Osborne. Now you notice that this cover is in color. But one of the text features, when we get inside, you're going to notice that the pictures inside are black and white. They're not in color. So one thing I want to do is I'm going to read, and I want you to think about making pictures in your mind with what you hear, because there's not a lot of pictures in this story. Of course, I'll show you the ones that come with the chapters, but I want you to think about what's going to happen next and think about, because it's a pretty exciting series. So here's another text feature that we talked about. This is the table of contents, and it's showing you right there that there are 10 chapters. So in this first part, I'm going to read the first 5 chapters, and then in a little while, I'm going to do the second 5 chapters. So if you really like this book, you can think about what might be happening in the next part to come. So, of course, as I said, I will show you the pictures. So this is chapter 1, and this child's name is Jack, and this is Annie, and they are a brother and sister, and they live in Frog Creek, Pennsylvania. So let's see what happens. Chapter 1, Into the Woods. So you can see that they live near woods. So here we go. Chapter 1, Into the Woods. Help! A monster! Said Annie. Oh, yeah, sure, said Jack. A real monster in Frog Creek, Pennsylvania. Run, Jack, said Annie, and she ran up the road. Oh, brother, thought Jack. This is what he got for spending time with his 7-year-old sister. Annie loved pretend stuff, but Jack was 8.5, and he liked real things. Watch out, Jack! The monster is coming, said Annie. Jack didn't say anything. Come on, Jack, I'll race you, said Annie. No, thanks, said Jack, and Annie raced alone into the woods. Jack looked up at the sky. The sun was about to set. Come on, Annie, it's time to go home, yelled Jack. But Annie didn't answer. Jack waited. Annie, he called again. Jack, Jack, Annie shouted, come here, quick. Jack groaned. Ugh, this better be good, he said. Jack left the road and headed into the woods. The trees were lit with the golden late afternoon light. Over here, called Annie. Annie was standing under a very tall oak tree. Look, she said, and she pointed at a rope ladder. It was hanging down from high in the tree. So it was like a little ladder made out of rope. Wow, Jack whispered. And at the top of the tree was a treehouse tucked between 2 branches. So they followed the rope and they looked up and they saw a treehouse. Wow, that must be the highest tree in the world, said Annie. it? Asked Jack. Who built that treehouse? I've never seen it before. I don't know, said Annie, but I'm going up. No, we don't know who it belongs to, Jack said. Just for a teeny minute, said Annie, and she started up the ladder. Annie, come back, said Jack. But Annie kept climbing, and she climbed all the way up to the tallest branches. Oh, we get to see a picture now of what we've been hearing. You can see the rope ladder. You can see the tree at the top. Look at how tall that was. Just picture that as I'm reading. Jack sighed. Oh, Annie, it's almost dark. We have to go home. But Annie disappeared inside the treehouse. Annie, Jack called. Jack waited a moment. He was about to call again when Annie poked her head out of the treehouse window. Books, Annie shouted. What? Said Jack. It's filled with books, said Annie. Oh man, Jack thought. He loved books. Jack pushed his glasses into place. He gripped the sides of the rope ladder and he started up. So Annie's already up there. And there, Jack's going to start up. Already on chapter 2. This chapter is called The Monster. Jack crawled into the treehouse. Wow, he said. The treehouse was filled with books. Books were everywhere. Very old books with dusty covers and new books with shiny, bright covers. Look, said Annie, looking out the treehouse window. You can see far away. As she was peering out the treehouse window, Jack looked out the window with her. Below were the tops of other trees, but way in the distance, he could see the Frog Creek Library and their elementary school in the park. Then Annie pointed in the other direction. There's our house, she said. Annie was right. Jack could see their white wooden house with its green porch. In the yard next door were their neighbor's black dog, Henry. He looked very tiny from way up there. Hi, Henry, shouted Annie. Shh, we're not supposed to be up here, said Jack. Jack glanced around the treehouse again. He noticed that bookmarks were sticking out of many of the books. Ooh, I wonder who owns all these books, he said. I like this one, said Annie, and she picked up a book with a castle on the cover. Here's a book about Pennsylvania, said Jack, and he turned to the page with the bookmark. Well, listen to this. Hey, here's a picture of Frog Creek, right where we live, said Annie. And it's a picture of these exact woods. Oh, here's a book for you, said Annie. And she held up a book about dinosaurs. A blue silk bookmark was sticking out of it. Silk is kind of a very soft cloth, so that was the bookmark. Let me see, said Jack. He set his backpack down on the floor and he grabbed the book from Annie. Okay, you look at that one and I'll look at the one about castles, said Annie. No, we better not, said Jack. We don't know who these books belong to. But even as he said this, Jack was opening the dinosaur book to the place where the bookmark was. He couldn't help himself. Jack turned to a picture of an ancient flying reptile. He recognized it as a pteranodon. He touched the huge bat-like wings in the picture. Wow, whispered Jack. Now listen to what he said because this is really important. Wow, whispered Jack. I wish we could go to the time of the pteranodons. Jack studied the picture of the odd-looking creature that was soaring through the sky. Ah! Screamed Annie. What? Said Jack. A monster! Annie cried, and she pointed out the treehouse window. Oh, stop pretending, Annie, said Jack. No, really, said Annie. And Jack looked out the window. A giant creature was gliding above the treetops. It had a long, weird crest on the back of its head, a shiny beak, and huge bat-like wings. It was a real, live pteranodon. The creature swooped through the sky. It looked like a glider plane. It was coming straight toward the treehouse. Get down! Cried Annie. Jack and Annie crouched on the floor. The wind started to blow. The treehouse started to spin. It spun faster and faster. Then everything was still, absolutely still. Chapter 3. Where is here? Jack had closed his eyes. He was so scared. But now Jack opened his eyes. Sunlight slanted through the window. The treehouse was still high up in the tree, but it wasn't in the same tree. Where are we? Said Annie. She and Jack looked out the window. The pteranodon was soaring through the sky. The ground was covered with ferns and tall grass. Ferns are kind of like long, spiky plants. There was a winding stream, a sloping hill, and volcanoes in the distance. I don't know where we are, said Jack. The pteranodon glided down to the base of the tree. It landed on the ground and stood very still. Wow, so what just happened to us? Said Annie. Well, said Jack, I was looking at the picture in the book, and you said, wow, I wish we could go to the time of the pteranodon, said Annie. Yeah, I did. And then we saw a pteranodon on the Frog Creek woods, said Jack. Yeah. And then the wind got loud and the treehouse started spinning, said Annie. And we landed here, said Jack. And we landed here, said Annie. So that means, said Jack. So that means what? Said Annie. I don't know, said Jack. He shook his head. None of this can be real. Annie looked out the window again. But he's real, she said. He's very real. Jack looked out the window with her again. The pteranodon was standing at the base of the tree like a guard. His giant wings were spread out on either side of him. Hi, shouted Annie. Shh, said Jack. We're not supposed to be here. But where is here? Said Annie. I don't know, said Jack. Hi, who are you? Annie called to the pteranodon. The creature just looked up at her. Are you nuts? He can't talk, said Jack. But maybe the book can tell us. And Jack looked down at the book and he read the words under the picture. So the caption, which is the words under a picture in a book, said this, told about the pteranodon. It said, this flying reptile lived in the Cretaceous period and it vanished 65 million years ago with the dinosaurs. That's impossible, said Jack. We can't have gone to a time 65 million years ago. Jack, said Annie, he's nice. Nice, said Jack. Yeah, I can tell, said Annie. Let's go down to him. Go down, said Jack. And Annie started down the rope ladder. So there's Annie going down, and there's the flying reptile right at the bottom. You can see the crest on his head that Jack was talking about. Hey, come back, said Jack. But Annie kept going. Annie, wait, Jack called. Annie dropped to the ground. She stepped boldly up to the ancient creature. She wasn't even afraid. Chapter 4 is called Henry. Jack gasped as Annie reached out her hand toward the pteranodon. Oh no, he thought. Annie was always trying to make friends with animals, but this was going too far. Don't get too close to him, Annie, Jack shouted. But Annie touched the pteranodon's crest. She stroked his neck. She was talking to him. What in the world is she saying? Jack wondered. He took a deep breath. Okay, he would go down too. It would be a good time to examine a pteranodon. He could take notes like a scientist. Jack started down the rope ladder. When he reached the ground, he was only a few feet away from the creature. The pteranodon stared at Jack. His eyes were bright and alert. He's soft, Jack, said Annie. He feels like Henry. Remember Henry was the dog, the neighbor's dog they saw? Jack snorted. Oh, he's no dog, Annie. Feel him, Jack, said Annie. But Jack didn't move. Don't think, Jack. Just do it, Annie said. So Jack stepped forward. He reached out very cautiously. That's kind of another way to say he was a little bit scared. He didn't want to be too fast. He brushed his hand down the creature's neck. Interesting, Jack thought. A thin layer of fuzz covered the pteranodon's skin. Soft, huh? Said Annie. Jack reached into his backpack and he pulled out a pencil and his notebook and he wrote, fuzzy skin. Look at that. I wrote that. What are you doing? Asked Annie. Taking notes, said Jack. We're probably the first people in the whole world to ever see a real live pteranodon. Jack looked at the pteranodon again. The bony crest on top of his head was longer than Jack's arm. So let's look at that crest. See that crest on the top of the pteranodon's head? It was longer than Jack's arm, and it was kind of bony. I wonder how smart he is, Jack said. Oh, very smart, said Annie. Don't count on it, said Jack. His brain's probably no bigger than a little bean. No, he's very smart. I can feel it, said Annie. I'm going to call him Henry. But Jack wrote in his notebook, small brain with a question mark. He wasn't really quite sure. Jack looked at the creature again. Maybe he's a mutant, he said. The pteranodon tilted its head. Annie laughed. He's not a mutant, Jack. Well, what's he doing here then? Where is this place? Said Jack. Annie leaned close to the pteranodon. Do you know where we are, Henry? She asked softly. The creature fixed his eyes on Annie. His long jaws were opening and closing like a giant pair of scissors. Are you trying to talk to me, Henry? Asked Annie. Forget it, Annie, Jack wrote in his notebook. Mouth like scissors. Did we come to a time long ago, Henry? Asked Annie. Is this a place from long ago? Suddenly, Annie gasped. Jack! Jack looked up. Annie was pointing toward the hill. On top stood a huge dinosaur. Anybody think they know what kind of dinosaur that is? I'm going to give you a hint. 1, 2, 3 horns. That's right. That's a triceratops. And tri is a prefix that means 3, like tricycle has 3 wheels. And triceratops has 3 horns. This is our last chapter for now, chapter 5, Gold in the Grass. Go, go, said Jack. He threw his notebook into his pack. He pushed Annie toward the rope ladder. Bye, Henry, Annie said. Go, said Jack. He gave Annie another soft push. Quit it, she said, but she started up the ladder and Jack scrambled after her. Jack and Annie tumbled into the treehouse. They were panting. That means they were breathing really hard, like when you run fast. They were panting as they looked out the window at the dinosaur. It was standing on the hilltop, eating flowers off a tree. Oh man, whispered Jack, we are in a time long ago. The dinosaur looked like a huge rhinoceros with 3 horns instead of 1. It had 2 long horns above its eyes, and another one grew out from its nose. It had a big shield-like thing behind its head. So let's go back and look at that description. So we can see the horn from the nose and the 2 up there, and here's the big shield-like thing behind its head. Triceratops, said Jack. Does he eat people? Whispered Annie. I'll look it up. Jack grabbed the dinosaur book and he flipped through the pages. There, said Jack, pointing to a picture of a triceratops, and he read the caption under the picture. And it said, the triceratops lived in the late Cretaceous period. This plant-eating dinosaur weighed over 12,000 pounds. Jack slammed the book shut. Phew, he said, just plants, no meat. That Triceratops was a plant eater. Oh, good, said Annie. Let's go see him up close. Are you crazy, said Jack. Well, don't you want to take notes about him? Asked Annie. We're probably the first people in the whole world to ever see a real live Triceratops. Jack sighed. Oh, Annie was right. Okay, let's go, he said. Jack shoved the dinosaur book into his pack. He slung his backpack over his shoulder. Annie started down the ladder, and Jack followed her. Just promise me you won't pet him, Jack called down to Annie. I promise, said Annie. Promise you won't kiss him, said Jack. I promise, said Annie. Promise you won't talk to him. I promise, said Annie. Promise you won't? Don't worry, said Annie. Annie and Jack stepped off the ladder. The pteranodon gave them a friendly look. Annie blew him a kiss. Be back soon, Henry, she called. Shh, said Jack, and he led the way slowly and carefully through the ferns. And when Jack and Annie reached the bottom of the hill, they knelt behind a bush. Annie started to speak, but Jack quickly put his finger to his lips. Then he and Annie peeked out at the Triceratops. The dinosaur was bigger than a truck. He was eating flowers off a magnolia tree. Jack slipped his notebook out of his pack and he wrote, eats flowers. So all the notes he was taking about what he was seeing. Annie nudged him, but Jack ignored her. He studied the Triceratops again, and then he wrote, eats slowly. Annie nudged him harder. Jack looked at her. Annie pointed to herself, and she walked her fingers through the air. She pointed to the dinosaur, and she smiled. Is she teasing? Jack wondered. But Annie waved at Jack. Jack started to grab her, but she laughed and jumped away. She fell into the grass in full view of the Triceratops. Get back, whispered Jack. Too late. The big dinosaur had spotted Annie. He gazed down at her from the hilltop. So imagine Annie's at the bottom. This big Triceratops is looking down. Half of a magnolia flower was sticking out of his mouth. Oops, said Annie. Get back, Jack said again. He looks nice, Jack, said Annie. Nice? Watch out for his horns, Annie, said Jack. The Triceratops gazed calmly down at Annie. Then he turned and loped down the other side of the hill. So when you lope, it's kind of you're walking slowly. So he kind of loped down the other side of the hill. Bye, said Annie, and she turned back to Jack. See? Jack grunted, but he wrote in his notebook, nice. So I guess he thought this Triceratops was nice too. Come on, let's look around some more, said Annie. Oh my goodness. I thought you would love this picture. there they were. Let's see what happens. As Jack started after Annie, he saw something glittering in the tall grass. What does that mean if something's glittering? Oh, I think somebody said it. That's right. It's catching the light, something shiny that might catch the light. Jack reached down and picked it up. Look at his hand. It's a gold medallion. So the gold is what was shiny. And I'm noticing something about the medallion. Do you notice something about it? I'll get it really close to the camera. There's a letter on it. That's right. Did you see that letter M? A letter M was engraved on the medallion, a fancy M. Oh man, someone was here before us, said Jack softly. Do you believe that's 5 chapters already? So in those 5 chapters, they took a walk in the woods by their house. They found the tree house and the ladder. They climbed up. It was full of books that had bookmarks in it. They opened up to one of the bookmarks. And then when Jack said, I wish we could be there, what happened? You're right. The treehouse started to spin and shake. And all of a sudden, they found themselves back in the time of the dinosaurs, just like it showed in the picture. And we saw 2 kind of dinosaurs so far, the flying pteranodon and the triceratops with 3 horns and a shield. And what did we learn about the triceratops? That it is a plant eater. You're right, I heard somebody say that. So chapter 6, Dinosaur Valley. So until next time, think about what must be happening with Jack and Annie until we get to see the end. And I wonder how they're ever going to get back to their house. Remember, it was getting late when they went in the woods. Bet their family's kind of expecting them home for dinner soon. I wonder what's going to happen. I can't wait to find out. So till next time, my friends, keep enjoying the pleasures of a good book, and I'll see you soon.